One of the major areas of complaint and controversy in Battlefield 1 was weapon customization, and I do not mean this in a visual, instead in a functional sense. Essentially, the removal of the attachment system we had in Battlefield 4. It caused many complaints in the community. Many a word from influential commentators or other gamers was wasted on trying to convince DICE to implement a proper system that would allow individual users to adapt the weapons to their personal playstyles and preferences. Ultimately, it all fell on deaf ears though, because we're still stuck with the same preset-based system in Battlefield 1 that we have since day one. The same, however, cannot be said for Battlefield 5. Customization here is not only visual, it is also functional, and in that sense far more complex than what we previously had in Battlefield 1. Essentially, the player has more choices than they have had in the past with Battlefield 1. Not necessarily, however, at least in terms of functional gameplay, compared to Battlefield 4. Although the individual choices do seem to be slightly more influential than what we had in past Battlefield games in total. That being said, let's start off with the basics of the system, because the system is split essentially into two parts: Armory versus the company, visual customization versus functional customization. In the Armory, you can essentially equip, buy, and find new skins. It's also where you receive your skins you get for free if you've played with a certain gun a certain amount of time, and you camo for a certain part of your weapon that you've recently been using a lot. I don't know when exactly you get it, but what many people have been able to confirm, and myself as well, have noticed, if you play with a certain weapon for a couple rounds, you'll ultimately end up finding in the Armory a number of unlocked skins for certain parts of those weapons, which is good, which is fine. That's the visual aspect of customization, and frankly it's of little importance for those of us who care about the actual mechanics of the game and not how great we look while playing the game. The company is where the meaningful progression and customization happens with weapons in Battlefield 5's beta, and ultimately will do in the final game as well. The reason is because here you find the skill tree associated with each individual weapon. What it allows you to do is, as you progress and level up your individual weapon, which you can do in Battlefield 5, you can choose between different choices in a set skill tree. Not all are available, they come at the opportunity cost of not being able to make other choices. For example, you may choose a faster ADS time, or a faster muzzle velocity, reduced horizontal recoil or reduced vertical recoil, and more changes like that. Actually quite meaningful, impactful changes to your weapon. Now, the unlocks are done not only via level of the individual weapon, so you require a certain level to be able to even apply such upgrades in the skill tree, but also by in-game currency, which you frankly earn plentiful of by just playing the game, or so it has been so far in the beta of Battlefield 5. So far so good then, a meaningful progression and customization system which actually changes the way your weapon behaves. Some of the problems start to creep up when we talk about the trade-off costs and the opportunity costs of actually applying these upgrades, as well as what it means for balance in-game, newer versus more experienced players, because it ultimately results in an unfair advantage for those who have played longer versus those who are fresh off in the game. And while that is natural, that is the consequence simply of having progressed in the game, it is normal that players who spend more time playing a game tend to be better. This is usually because of practice, map knowledge, perfected movement, better aim, whatever it may be. Many of the skills that you acquire by mastering or playing a game for a longer period of time, it should never be by default, simply because the game essentially gives you better tools, better weapons to use. It's why people get so upset when others are able to buy higher end items in RPGs or even shooters such as Star Wars Battlefront 2, or flat out upgrades over what other players are able to use. This isn't really a great system. It's not a great system when it's earned, as it is in Battlefield 5, or at least so far in the beta, by simply playing a lot. It's even worse if you can pay for it. Now, we're not looking at a pay-to-win system in Battlefield 5 just yet. Thankfully, it's not another Star Wars Battlefront 2, but we currently are looking at an imbalance between new and older players. Let me outline how this would function in the case of the STG, a weapon I have played for the majority of the beta so far, and have already managed to fully upgrade the path I chose. While it is true there is an opportunity cost to the choices I have made, I can't choose all of the upgrades, I have to choose which ones I want, and then cannot have the others. Although I should note, as a helpful user pointed out in yesterday's video, you can actually have multiple STGs and customize them then in different ways. So you can have essentially an STG for every situation you need. Maybe one focused more on hip fire, close quarter, quick reaction, knee jerk, combat, and one focused more on accuracy, ADS, and more medium long-range engagement. But let's go back to the STG upgrades I've made. Amongst them are faster ADS time, higher degree of accuracy, a much improved muzzle velocity, and reduced horizontal recoil. So those are some of the upgrades that I've made to my STG. Now, if I am, at level whatever I am, facing off another enemy, which is just freshly joined Battlefield 5 or Battlefield 5's beta in this case, and they're using a naked STG, I have a weapon that is flat out better than theirs by no other merit than already having played the game. And I personally, as well as others I've spoken to or seen speak in forums or on Twitter, etc., amongst the community members, have voiced concern about this imbalance. It's essentially unfair. Furthermore, from a just strictly progression-based system, not even talking about how competitive or uncompetitive or unfair this is, I don't really approve of a system which doesn't come with trade-offs. What's the point really then of having your weapon run in a certain way? In essence, you're always going to want to upgrade it, you're always going to upgrade it max, and there's only a few choices you can take. You're not going to dynamically adjust your weapon to suit the purpose that you need it to, and it actually leads to a lot less depth in the progression system, in the customization system, because ultimately, once you've made your choices, that's pretty much it. There's no point in revisiting, adjusting, and changing a weapon beyond maybe one or two variants of each weapon because, well, there isn't any downsides to the upgrades you have. There's only plus sides, and there's only really kind of two set combinations, maybe three, if you take into account with the STG the final choice you can make, variants of the weapon that are ever going to be competitive, the best versions of those weapons. It's not as complex as Battlefield 4's system where you constantly have to consider, well, am I using maybe this carbine with a high degree of recoil at a more medium range engagement? In this case, should I then maybe go for a compensator, a muzzle brake, because I can't deal with the recoil? Or am I dealing in close quarter situations where more hip fire focused or shooting while moving, angled grips and vertical grips are more practical? These choices and changes were made continuously throughout Battlefield 4, at least personally for me, because I was adapting the weapon to the way I play at all times, because I was adapting it to the game mode and map. The same will not be the case for Battlefield 5 with the current system implemented. And I'm equally frustrated about that, the consequential lack of depth, as I am about the unfair advantage it gives to players like myself who will ultimately sink hundreds if not thousands of hours into this game versus players who simply cannot and do not want to spend that amount of time playing Battlefield 5. The last thing I would like to mention, and this is a small point, is the actual power of some of these upgrades. I mean, a flat out RPM boost to a weapon is strong. So is frankly improved hipfire, but that is usual for upgrades and weapons. But a horizontal recoil buff on something like the STG, very powerful. And I think I'd be lying if I wouldn't say the difference between my now fully upgraded STG versus the stock STG I started with when the beginning of the beta is not most definitely noticeable. That being said, let me know down below in the comments what you think of weapon progression and customization in Battlefield 5's beta so far. Do you agree with my criticism regarding the system, or do you think that the system implemented is actually a much improved version of what we had in the past and is good the way it should be? Let me know that, as well as of course your usual video suggestions down below in the comments, or hit me up with them on Twitter. If you enjoyed the video, found it helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.